Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular scheduled Tabor Town Council meeting for May the 25th, 2020. We also have a Subdivision Authority meeting we'll have to take care of first, so I will call that Subdivision Authority meeting, or to order, please, and ask for an adoption of the agenda as presented. Councillor Garner?
Mr. Mayor, I so move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 3, the minutes of April 27th, 2020. Mr. Armfield.
Yes, those meeting minutes form part of your council subdivision package, and if you're able to adopt them via motion, please go ahead. If not, please just provide us with direction for amendments.
Thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the Subdivision Authority adopts the minutes of the regular meeting of Subdivision Authority held on April 27, 2020 as presented.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to agenda item number 4, Subdivision TT 18-0-007. Mr. Armfield.
Yes, one of 2 subdivisions for consideration. One's an extension and one's an actual subdivision. The extension is first. I'll pass it over to Ms. Monks to lead us through the details.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Monks.
Mr. Armfield, good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council. At the December 13th, 2018 regular meeting of the Subdivision Authority, the subdivision at 5061 41st Avenue was approved. The approval is for a 1-year period. The applicant had conditions to meet prior to being able to endorse the tentative plan. The conditions are close to being completed, but in order to keep the file progressing, an extension is required, and that process requires the approval of the Subdivision Authority. Administration would request that Council approve the extension of 1 year in order to assist the applicant with finalizing his file.
All right. Thank you. Any questions arising? None whatsoever. Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Thames.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the Subdivision Authority approve an extension for subdivision application TT 18-0-007, lots 23 through 25, block 39, plan 575T within the southwest quarter, section 32, township 9, range 16, west of the 4th meridian, civically described as 5061 41st Avenue for a period of 1 year from May 25th, 2020.
All right. Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the next item involves my family, so I'd like to excuse myself.
All right. Absolutely. Thank you. And next is related to subdivision application TT 19-0-003. Mr. Armfield.
Yes, this is for creation of a lane at Summit Motors. Please, Ms. Monks.
Correct.
Ms. Monks.
So administration has been processing an application from Martin Geomatics on behalf of Summit Motors to facilitate a closure of a lane and construction of a new portion of a road in order to redirect traffic near their business. At the regular meeting of Council on August 19, 2019, first reading was given by Resolution 477, 2019 for the road closure bylaw. At the September 9th meeting, a public hearing was held. The application had been advertised in the Tabor Times and sent to adjacent landowners. One of the neighbors had expressed a concern regarding a potential traffic shortcutting through the laneway. The applicant has since confirmed that the yard would be fenced and commercial traffic will stay on the property and utilize the service road connecting to Highway 3. So at the April 27, 2020 regular meeting of Council, third reading of the road closure was given by Council Resolution 178, 2020. The final step in this process is for the subdivision to be approved and the applicant to enter into a development agreement to construct the new laneway. The road closure and subdivision can then be registered concurrently. Administration recommends this application for approval as it will allow the applicant to move forward and create a separation between this commercial application and residential property traffic.
All right. Thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the Subdivision Authority approve subdivision application TT 19-0-003, lane creation within Lot 48, Block 1, Plan 1512193, and consolidation of a portion of Lot 48, Block 1, Plan 1512193, with a portion of Lot 39, Block 1, Plan 7710425 within the northeast quarter section 31, Township 9, Range 16, west of the 4th meridian, with the following conditions 1 through 5.
Right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. I just asked for a motion to close the subdivision authority meeting. Councilor Barone.
I move that we close the meeting.
Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, moving on to the regular scheduled Tabor Town Council meeting for today's date. I will call the meeting to order and ask for an adoption of the agenda as presented. Councilor Beckering?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we adopt the agenda, I would like council's permission to add an item to the agenda, please.
All right, and what would that be?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would propose to title it Economic Consideration, and because it involves things of a private nature that would be under closed session committee of the whole under Section 24 of the Freedom of Information Privacy Act.
All right, thank you. So we can make that item 9.3,
Mr. Mayor.
economic considerations. All right. Councilor Chavez?
Your Worship, just clarification, we have an item 9.1. I wonder if that could be moved to open session.
Yes, that can be, absolutely. So with that, that's item 9.1 for closed session currently to be moved to, for an action item, Mr. Armfeldt, is that suitable? 6.9 would be applicable in that case? Or
Yeah, I would say that's an action item, sir. Yes.
okay. All right, so let's do that. Make that request, the closed session item 9.1 recognition request, now move to open session for 6.9. And with that, I would ask for a motion to accept the adoption of the agenda as amended. Councillor Towns.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Good, thank you. On to item 3, adoption of minutes. Item 3.1, minutes of the regular meeting of council, May the 11th. That can't be correct. May the 11th, 2020. Oh, sorry, it is. That was last week. What am I thinking? We're 2 weeks ahead. All right, meeting the May the 11th, 2020, regular meeting of council. Anything arising in that regard? Mr. Armfeldt, nothing to add with that?
They're yours to adopt at your pleasure.
All right. Someone prepared to make that motion. Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move the council adopts the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on May 11th, 2020 as presented.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to item number 4, business arising from the minutes. There are none. Business item 4.1, backyard hens. Mr. Armfeldt.
Yes, I'll call Ms. Monks up to assist on this one. That she has a presentation to provide council. Essentially, this is subsequent to a presentation on backyard hens that was provided to council a couple of weeks ago.
All right, thank you, Ms. Monks.
Monks.
Your Worship and members of council, Mr. Armfeldt, I don't have a mouse here. So
Oh,
I'll have
I think
to-
Ala took it.
Is that? So, Your Worship and members of council, at the regular meeting of council on April 27th, a presentation was made by Danielle Kenyon requesting council consideration of a potential backyard hen program in the town of Tabor. Resolution 189-2020 moved by Councillor Firth that council request additional information from administration in form of a research document outlining what a backyard hens project for the town of Tabor would look like was passed. So we've prepared a short presentation, and I believe there was additional information provided. So there are many benefits to backyard hens, allowing residents to teach their children about livestock and providing a source for eggs. Similar to gardening, it teaches about providing your own food source. It's an option in many municipalities in Alberta. I won't read verbatim because I know you've already seen your presentation. If a bylaw were to be approved, a backyard hen licensing process would be set up. We would recommend the requirement for applicants to provide proof of completion of a course. This would ensure that applicants are aware of how to properly care for the animals, as well as being upfront with the costs associated with raising hens properly. Alberta Farm Animal Care and River City Chicken Collective both offer online courses. The applicant would also be required to provide their Alberta Premise Identification Number. This is required by the Government of Alberta for anyone keeping livestock. A site plan identifying the location of the coop would be required. We've proposed setbacks and size standards, and we can ensure adherence to those. A building permit may be required depending on the size of the accessory building, as well as potentially an electrical permit if they're installing heaters or anything like that. In reviewing different processes that municipalities have put in place for restricting hen houses, the most common seem to be a limit on the number of licenses in the community. Different communities use different processes to determine that, but all of the municipalities that we contacted indicated that their programs are not overly utilized, so setting limits was not an issue. So Tabor could consider a couple of options, such as no more than 1 hen license per 100 people. With our estimated population, we would be considering potentially 85 licenses, 1% of the population. We could further then have a maximum per year allotment, so we don't see a big jump in one particular year, as we would anticipate that they may or may not stay in with them. Or we could just do a set number. We could set it at 20 licenses maximum and monitor their situation. If we continue to have additional requests, we could review it annually with council to evaluate if an increase is warranted or required. And we could set up a waiting list if that was necessary. So for site criteria, in reviewing what other municipalities have done, we've provided a list of site criteria for any applications. The yard should be fully fenced, be 300 meters squared or larger. Some considerations could be given for slightly smaller lots if they meet an identified criteria. So if they're adjacent to an open space or have an isolation from adjacent neighbors. Landowner permission is required for anyone with a rental unit. We've identified that we would propose what we would propose for setbacks here. So slightly larger than what an accessory use setback would be what we would consider. But we can do anything that council prefers. We could just treat it as a typical accessory building if that was the preference. Administration proposes the coops only be allowed in the backyard rather than in a side yard or in a front yard, so that for one, you can protect the hens themselves from predators, but also it just helps with a little bit of the disruption to a neighbor. So we've reviewed the guidelines for urban hen keepers and other municipal standards and determined these suggested standards. So this would ensure the hens have a required amount of space to ensure that they're healthy, but also keeping the coops at a moderate size. Enclosed outdoor spaces that provide them with protection from predators is also required. So those exceeding 10 meters squared will require a building permit, and an electrical permit is required for anything like a heater or lights or anything like that. And then just under some additional considerations that we thought council might find of interest, we would propose a minimum of 2 hens and a maximum of 4. Hens require companionship. They're herd animals, so we would recommend against a single hen. 4 will allow owners to plan for the life of the hen while still providing for laying hens to be in place. They should be a minimum of 16 weeks old. No roosters should be allowed. They're not required for hens to lay eggs, and they just create noise and potential concerns for neighbors. Hens should be secured inside the coop between the hours of 10 and 7. This will help with noise and also protect them from predators. So we would propose that the eggs, meat, and manure products not be for sale. The provincial government has a process that they can follow in allowing them to be raised for that purpose, but most municipalities do not allow that. Manure must be stored properly in the backyard compost or disposed of in municipal compost. Hens cannot be slaughtered on site. They must be taken to an approved butcher or a disposal facility. These are things that help also with pests or rodents. So those were some of the concerns that we had heard at the last meeting. Administration would propose that through the process of applying for a business license, adjacent properties would be notified and given 14 days plus 7 days deemed receipt of the notice to appeal. We felt just the immediate adjacent properties and not doing that 100-meter buffer that we would normally do for a development, just those that could be impacted by it. But we could, again, expand that if council desired. So hen license would be specific to a person and location that they're approved at. So this would mean that the person moving cannot just automatically take that hen license to their new property. They would have to reapply. And then again, it would not stay with the home. So we would want to ensure whoever took over that hen house had the proper training to ensure that it was safe and healthy and suitable for the hen. The hens would not be permitted in the residential dwellings. Feed and supplies must be stored so as not to entice rodents or pests. So again, we'd want something that's completely rodent proof. Hen coops would need to be cleaned often and disinfected annually. So we'd have to potentially send out a reminder or just rely on people, I guess, to do that. But I think that's the important part of the training, right? That they're learning what some of the difficulties and problems will be. So fees, administration would propose fees to be set in the bylaw at a suggested value of potentially $50 a year, with the license required to be renewed annually. I guess that would, again, give us that opportunity to ensure that they were following proper health procedures. This would cover the administrative costs and also keep license information up to date should council decide to amend or rescind the bylaw in future. Information would be readily available. The range that we found was anywhere from $20 a chicken to a maximum of $75 a license. And so then next steps, if council was in favor of the proposal, administration could draft a bylaw for consideration and to take through the process.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Councillor Chavez.
Your Worship, I've had a lot of negative feedback from town residents when they read this. And unfortunately, I didn't get an opportunity to get up north and see one of these facilities, but the way it sits presently right now with all the negative feedback I've had and the disparaging comments that we would even consider something like this, I'm afraid I can't vote in favor of proceeding ahead with this motion.
All right, thank you. Councillor Bruin.
Mr. Mayor, I've had the same feedback I believe that Councillor Strauss has had. I spoke to neighbors, and they're neighbors and general public, and they think it's kind of funny that we'd even consider it. So I cannot vote in favor of this.
Great, thank you. Anything else arising? Any other questions? Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No questions, but I find that surprising. I thought this was both the presentation that we had at our last meeting and this presentation were very well researched, and I thought that there are plenty of considerations taken to mitigate any nuisance or any risk that would potentially arise for neighbors or adjacent properties. So I would be in favor of this, and I would be prepared to make a motion to that effect.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'd just like to add a little to the same thing. We've had them here before, years past, and there may be some now, actually, as well as other livestock in town here. It's certainly not uncommon. I thought the original presentation was very well done a few weeks back, as well as Miss Monk's another thorough research involved there. Okotoks, I guess, was kind of the example that was set up there. And I liked what I saw there, and it seemed to be reasonable. So I would support Councillor Firth's suggestion also in that regard. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Firth?
Mr. Mayor, I move that council directs administration to draft a bylaw to allow residents to raise up to 4 hens in their backyards and other particulars included in the report to council.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Defeated. Thank you. Item 4.2, economic relief consideration leaseholders. Mr. Arfeld.
Yes, and I'm going to call on Ms. Van Ham remotely to guide council through this one. There was direction to participate in the federal government's rent relief program. That program has come out, and there is no opportunity for municipalities to participate in that program. So the leaseholders that we still have, as council is aware, they are looking for some form of relief. And Ms. Van Ham, are you on the line?
I am.
Would you like to provide a few more details here, please?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As Mr. Armpel stated, the program, the commercial rent relief program, was just the portal was just created today with some further information upcoming from last week, and that is the case. It doesn't pertain to municipal, provincial, or federal buildings when there's leaseholders within those sites. And so this is being brought forth to council for extra consideration or an additional opportunity for council's consideration if they would like to do anything with the existing leaseholders, as there has been some requests in that regard. I'm available for any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? No questions, comments, Councillor Chavez?
Yes, Your Worship. Unfortunately, I think this rent relief program that was put out was poorly designed. I looked at myself for some properties I own to allow for some considerations for some of my tenants as well, commercial tenants, and it just there's just not enough leeway there to endorse that. I'm quite disappointed. I thought that there would be a better program than that. And I do fully understand that these two facilities have been shut down, are in a bad way. The criteria of that the government has set out is a 25, that the tenant would have to pay 25% of the rent. And I would like to suggest that council covers for the months in question to follow the same guidelines that the government has put out, and that the town covers 75% and they pay the other 25%, which would have been what the federal government regulations are, and I could support that, and that would offer them some assistance.
All right, thank you. Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question through to Councillor Strovos and I suppose administration as well. If council was to cover 75% of the rent and the tenants would be responsible for 25%, would that cover the town's ongoing expenses such as utilities and any other expenses that are required for those properties while they're not being used?
That would probably be fairly close to covering our utility rates. I would ask council to specify, though, which leases we are discussing, which do these pertain to, because we have, besides the athletic facilities, which are on top of mind, I'm sure, there's a number of other locations, specifically on the south side of the curling rink, that are also leasehold properties. So we would want some specificity as to which properties are in and which properties are out.
All right, thank you. Councillor Chavez?
Worship, the motion, if I craft this motion, it would be specific to the two gyms that are on town property, as they're the ones that have been affected. I don't know much how the other ones have been affected, but specifically to those two.
Mr. Armfield?
And Mr. Mayor, if you're considering a motion coming through council, I would also request the months. There was conversation about the months that it would be pertaining to. I would request specificity with regards to the months.
All right, Mr. Armfield, just a clarification. What number of other businesses would that apply to, or other town-owned buildings? Not just the two gyms. The two gyms for sure, we know that.
Yeah, examples are K40. There's a K40 that you're testing my memory now. Miss Van Ham, help me out.
No problem. There is actually the curling club. There is actually in the arena concession, because they've also been shut down due to the renovations happening there, and she can't actually open because of that facility. And let's see here. Yeah. Top shares that with the K40 as well. They share that one space. And the Tabor and District Museum Society, they've also been shut down due to the restrictions. And then the two gyms that we have previously discussed.
All right, thank you. Anything else arising? To me, I think overall, if we're going to do one or two, we have to do them all to be consistent. It doesn't matter if they're different businesses or they're same town-old facilities. And to me, that's very applicable. If we're going to do it for one, we got to do them for all. And if that's, just to clarify, that 25%, if they're responsible for that, that does cover what our normal costs roughly.
Well, I mean, you're asking me, I would love the benefit of some research so we could actually quantify what our utilities cost every month and what we receive in value from them every month and bring it back into a spreadsheet form that would be black and white for council to consider.
It's a fairly open-ended question. I didn't mean to blindside you with that, but it's started with Councillor Firth, but I'm enhancing that. But so you're right, it's not completely fair. I guess I'm just looking for a guesstimate if that's in the range, likely that can we answer that?
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty tough to even question that.
Yeah.
Like we would
Okay, fair enough. I don't want to put you on the spot.
We'd want to go back and do our research so we provide council with the accurate information.
Fair enough. But all things considered, I think it's only fair and reasonable. If we're going to do one, we got to do the same for all. Councillor Thames.
Mr. Mayor, and yet the recommendation that we were given from administration, I think, is a better way to look at this, because it it gives the opportunity to all the leaseholders to approach the town, and we're asking to work with individual leaseholders to determine what their impact is and what they're willing to do. And I think the recommendation that came from administration covers every leaseholder and gives them the opportunity to defer their payments. I would rather support the recommendation that came from council, from administration, because I think it's more fair and gives administration the ability to work with these people.
All right, thank you. Anything else arising? Councillor Stravos?
Your Worship, I know some of these other places that are being utilized are service clubs. The curling club, not sure why they would need rent relief in the middle of summer. I'm not quite sure why we would go down that path, as we have not heard anything from them. I can't see why we would open it up to anything and everybody, because we don't know their personal financial circumstances, whether they are operating or whether they are not, whether they're having meetings, doing social distancing. I think probably I would prefer just the two businesses, because this is a bit, these two that approached us are actually businesses, and this rent relief program is designed for businesses, not for other organizations, because the other organizations don't really run a business. They're non-profits. It's a different entity. Service clubs.
I think as far as the curling rink, Councillor Stravos, I think that's something that's rented out annually, different weekends, etc. There's so different functions, that sort of thing. So there may not be an every weekend event, but they're certainly making use of it when they can, and right now they can't. So that certainly is an impact on that financial hardship as well for that type of business. I'm not sure about the other ones you referred to, but that one for sure would fit that criteria. Councillor Beckering.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Strovas. Let's just address the two gyms at the present time. If there's a further request from some other organization that the town is involved with, we can handle it at that time. But to do a blanket lease relief, I don't think would be proper. I think those that have requested relief, we should accommodate them. And the suggestion of Councillor Strovas, 25%, fits the bill, I believe.
All right, thank you, Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would agree with Councillor Tams. My interpretation of the recommended motion is that administration would work with the lessees individually and determine whether they require rent relief or not, that it wasn't a blanket motion that would cover all lessees, and correct me if I'm wrong. But, and the difference being most of the not-for-profits that operate within our lease facilities, I wouldn't think would require the rent relief, but these two businesses, I understand, have been shut down by Alberta Health Services, and I sympathize with them. My concern is that it creates an unfair advantage to the businesses that operate within town-owned facilities. Would any other business in town have the opportunity to have 75% of their rent covered by council? That's my only concern with Councillor Stravos's motion.
All right. Any other questions? Councillor Bruin?
Just a comment. I'd have to agree with Carly, or Councillor Firth on this one. You're setting a precedent here. Businesses, it's up to, you're going to, I just think we should stick with recommended motion here.
Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion and float it. Vote it up or vote it down.
All right. Any other questions arise before we get to that? Comments? All right. Councillor Tams?
Sorry.
Sure. Councillor Firth, you had something?
I believe, Mr. Mayor, I believe that was Ms. Van Ham.
Oh, all right. Sorry. Ms. Van Ham?
Yeah, so the two other businesses did make a request. They just didn't formalize it in the letter. So that was the Arena Concession as well as the curling rink, who does have rentals during the summer months and has a payment attached. So just for council's information, thanks.
Sorry, so I'm not sure I caught all that. Just to clarify, those other two you mentioned did ask, they just haven't put in the form of a letter?
Correct. In my verbal conversations with both of those organizations, well, with the concession and with the curling club, they did make a request because they knew this agenda item was coming forward.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions in that regard? Councillor Tams?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move that council directs administration to, number one, work with individual lessees to determine the lessees' considerations and impacts for their business, and number two, for those lessees requesting defer the lease payments from April 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2020, with either deferred payments to be averaged out for the remaining term of the individual lease or adding the deferred lease payments onto the end of the lease, effectively extending the lease term.
All right, thank you. Councillor Stravos?
Yes, Your Worship. As I read the second part of this, it says with either the deferred payments to be averaged out. So we're really not giving them any relief because they're going to be paying down the road for it. Whereas my motion is more specifically to grant them relief so that they don't have to pay down the road. And we're not helping them because all we're doing is delaying their rent for down the road, and that's not a relief program. That's a rental deferring program, and that's not what the intent at these two specific businesses requested from us. These are specific businesses that asked for rent relief, and that's not what is positioned in this motion that Councillor Tams has crafted. It doesn't help them. All it does is defers them. I would like him to withdraw that motion and recraft it.
At the present point, Councillor Stravos, I'm not prepared to do that because I happen to think, as long as, and Councillor Firth has alluded to it, any other businesses in town doesn't have that opportunity neither. And I think all we're doing is we are doing exactly what we're trying to do. We're helping them. Because once they open their business back up for business, yes, they still might have to owe them money and pay the lease payments, but we've given them ample opportunity to pay that over time, and I think we're being more than fair.
Councillor Bruin.
Mr. Mayor, I'd have to agree with Councillor Tams there. The last sentence saying that we either defer the monthly payments, add to each month, or add to the end of the lease. So we're giving them the lease free in the end. In the end, it all works out, and I think you do this, we're going to open up a can of worms for other businesses in the town.
Mr. Stravas.
Your worship, so this motion as it's directed here says to September 30th. What happens if these businesses reopen here in June in the next wave of openings? Then are we still going to stick by that regulation to the 30th? This is not an effective motion. It doesn't really help them at all.
Mr. Garner.
I look at this whole situation, and are we offering relief, or are we just making a deferment? We say that this is unfair for other people. How do we know that? You can't tell me that those people can't go to their landlord and say, hey, I need some help here. We don't know that. We're assuming that. And I think when you look at the track record of these people, one of these renters of ours has been renting for 30 years. If we can't extend mercy in a situation like this, when are we going to do it?
Yeah, I would agree overall. You know, like all things considered, we've had 2 legitimate asks on paper, and I think maybe we're not prepared to deal with the other 2 that have asked verbally, but we're going to have to look at that at some point. But for now, dealing with the 2 particular gyms that have asked specifically, I think it's only fair and reasonable. We were willing to go along with what we felt or thought the federal and or provincial government was going to be part of that would fit the 4-way 25% split, which would be a 75% relief for the different businesses we're talking about. So what's the difference now? We're back to talking about is 75% reasonable, and both those particular business owners asked for either complete relief or some form of relief. So it solves one of the 2 asks with a 75% allotment, and I think it's fair and reasonable with if it's costing us somewhere in the 25% neighborhood to cover the rest, whether their business is closed or not. So I would be definitely in favor with what Councillor Stravas and Councillor Garner is to say, and I don't believe there's any precedent-setting format here and not comparable to any other business out there, private or otherwise. Mr. Arnfeld.
Mr. Mayor, you have a motion on the table, and the conversation when you have a motion on the table must stick to the subject matter of that motion. My suggestion to the council at this point is that the conversation is straying ways from the subject matter of that motion. Just as a tip. Thank you.
Councillor Garner.
One thing before, I would like to ask before we vote, if we could record this vote, please.
We can. Mr. Arnfeld.
Yes, absolutely. The vote can be recorded. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Nothing else arising related to the motion on the table. We do have a motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Defeated. All right, thank you.
Worship,
Councillor Stravas, yes.
I would like to craft a motion that council directs administration to follow the government landlord relief program, allowing 25% payment by the gym tenant, 75% from the town from April 2020 to the end of June 2020, inclusive for the 2 gyms.
All right. Anything else arising? I guess just to clarify, I think, was it not set out roughly for that to be the third phase rather, that these gyms can open up, I believe was the date applicable, correct?
I believe gyms were part of the second phase of opening, but I would have to confirm that.
I'm just going from memory here, but I thought it was the third, but I could be wrong.
No, I believe they were part of the second, but I'd have to bring the relaunch schedule back up based on that question and just have a look. It could very well have been the third.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason I just thought September rang a bell that could be when they're allowed to open if things continue to go well with relaunch phases. But anybody else have any recollection about that, Councillor Firth?
Sorry, I don't have any recollection about what stage that was. I just had a comment about the motion.
Sure.
To me, the difference between that federal rent relief program that we were intending to participate in until we couldn't, the difference is that all businesses in the town of Tabor had the opportunity to apply for that, along with their landlords. This motion passes, it only applies to the lessees that lease from the town. And I don't think it's equitable unless we are prepared to open this opportunity to cover 75% of rent for any business that was affected in the town of Tabor. I don't agree with this. I don't think it's equitable. I sympathize with these businesses that they are closed against their... Anyway, I think that by adding on the deferred payments to the end of the lease, they still have the opportunity to get out of that lease as per the terms of their, I think that anyway, that's all I had to say.
Councillor Beckering?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking in favor of the motion, and this is becoming somewhat complicated, but from my perspective, any competing business of the two gyms we're speaking of, that's part of the motion, are also able to apply for the federal rent assistance program. So there is no unfair advantage, in my opinion, unless I'm really mistaken here, to the town-owned lessees.
Mr. Arpel?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the gyms are on stage 3.
It is stage 3. Yes. And was that a September date, roughly? I know it was a end of June date, or June 19th or something. Well, for the second stage, I'm not sure. It seemed to me it was September for the third phase. Does that say that in there?
I don't think that's actually been stated anywhere, but that's been the kind of common assumption that September would be stage 3. Yes.
Okay. So I guess with that, speaking in favor of your motion, Councillor Stravas, would you consider an add-on to go to whenever the date is that they're able to open?
So you're suggesting a friendly amendment. So instead of June to their rescheduled opening, provincially guided opening.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to the end of June is great, but it would certainly be more applicable to whatever date that they're actually able to reopen, whether it be the end of the month closest to that or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, Your Worship, I'll rewrite this to include. I'll amend my own motion, or somebody can make a friendly amendment to the. I don't know what is the procedure. Whether I can amend it or Councillor Beckering might make the amendment.
Mr. Beckering?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The suggestion by the mayor is valid. The mayor can ask for a friendly amendment. So if he's willing to do so and you accept it, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say, in all fairness, if we're going to do this proper, then effective to September 30th is probably applicable.
Your Worship, so if they decide to open in July 15th, then should your motion not be to the scheduled reopening? Government,
or I guess saying that it's we're just speculating September. So I guess if you say right to the end of month date, close to whenever they're able to open, does that cover the bases?
To the scheduled reopening, granted opening.
Mr. Arfel, does that sound reasonable?
Yes, I can understand where you're headed, and as long as it's clear in the motion, I would think the stronger motion, if this is the way that council wants to go, is recognizing the reopening date,
right?
Not selecting a calendar date.
So just leave it open, just because we don't know, right? So that's part of the issue.
Right.
So yes, I would go with that. Then I would agree with Mr. Arnfeldt, Councillor Stravas, to friendly amendment to the motion to suggest the actual opening date these two gyms, local gyms, leasees are able to reopen.
Okay, then I'll just reread this here so that this is what you intend. That council directs administration to follow the government landlord relief program by allowing 25% by the gym tenant, 75% from the town from April 2020 to the scheduled reopening date.
All right, yes, thank you. think that's got it covered.
I feel that's clear from me.
Yeah.
You have some councillors that are shaking their heads back and forth.
Have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not to belabor the point, but I think it should be mentioned in a motion, like you said, Mr. Mayor, the provincial mandated opening as opposed to your wording there, Councillor Strobes.
I'll change that to provincial mandated reopening date. Okay, and then I'll have to rewrite this because it's got chicken scratch all over it, but
Mr. Garner?
I'd like to see this vote recorded also.
All right, absolutely. Mr. Armfeldt, that can be done also.
Yes, I'm assuming we are recording right now. And Ms. Van Ham, you're okay with recording the votes off of the recording if hands go in the air?
Yes, Mr. Armfeldt, I'll have to look back on the live feed, but that's totally acceptable.
Yeah, so that will be our technical solution for recording this vote.
All right,
as we
perfect,
go.
thank you. All right, Councillor Firth?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Councillor Stravas. Was there any intention for you to include any of the other lessees that had expressed concerns with your motion?
not unless they provide council with a written request. So this is specific to the two gyms because we've gotten an actual written request from them for relief.
That's correct. All right. Okay. Once again, we have a friendly amended motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. On to item 4.3, economic relief considerations, community futures information. Mr. Armfeldt.
Yes, stemming from the last council meeting, there was a request made for some additional information to come to council on what's happening in Medicine Hat with regards to community futures. I'm just going to that agenda package. There we go. Ms. Monks, if you would like to come up and share this information.
Ms. Monks.
Members of Council. At the May 11th regular meeting of Council, Resolution 209-2020 was passed, directing administration to contact Community Futures to obtain information on the Medicine Hat plan for businesses. Administration has had discussions with Medicine Hat Economic Development as well as Community Futures to obtain additional details. At this time, the details regarding the business relief program have not been released publicly. Discussions and negotiations are still currently underway. So the COVID Hat support program has announced $8.2 million, with $3.9 million of that being utilized to make up the 3.5% tax increase to businesses that the city has canceled. So they are actually taking that money from capital reserve to make up the amount. $1 million is slated for direct grants to the community foundations of Southeast Alberta and Community Warmth programs, which are not-for-profit social assistance organizations. $4 million is directed to community groups and economic development, with $2 million going to community futures. The idea being $500,000 blocks will be delved out over the life of the program, and this is the part that we are awaiting announcements for details. So economic development and community futures have proposed a hypothetical program, if council were interested in exploring that further, and that was included with your package. I won't go into detail with it. You can ask any questions you need. So the federal government did announce funding to Community Futures to provide support loans to local businesses that could not qualify for the Canada Emergency Business Account, the CEBA, that provides $40,000 loans with $10,000 of that being forgiven. These were intended initially for businesses that have paid a minimum of $20,000 in wages in 2019. However, following that announcement, that benefit was modified to allow for businesses without the wage restriction to also apply for those funds. So this provides access to many businesses that were not able to apply for relief under the original program, and it does fill that gap. So we've provided council with the current federal government supports in your package as well. And at this time, we've also supplied what we know of the Medicine Hat program and a potential program that you could review if you felt that there was a benefit for that. So we've provided that for your information and any further direction.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Comments? All right, I'll start it off. I guess thanks to our administration for following through with this. It started with myself, and I believe Councillor Garner had also been aware of this through some other channels. Is that correct? So to me, that's very commendable what Medicine Hat has decided to do, and I guess what you're saying, this is still in the beginning phases with Community Futures. So is this another one of these programs that it's not similar to what we've just dealt with? It's a lot of red tape to deal with and go through, and no timeline in place as far as when that may be actually validated to receive?
At this point, yes. And our Community Futures as well has expressed that there's potential funding coming here. They're just uncertain of the guidelines behind it at this time.
Okay. Did they give you any idea at all what to expect for any timeline?
Not yet, but they did also advise that the amendments that the federal government made to their program also opened up the door for some of those businesses that were struggling. So I think they were waiting then to see exactly where these funds would be best geared to, whether it was to help businesses with any capital outfall that they may have in resetting up to deal with the new norm, if that is what we would call it, or how they could consider looking at that. But at this point, they don't have any finite details yet. It's coming.
Any other questions arising? Comments? I think all things considered, Mr. Arfeld, so this is something that we just have to play the waiting game then, is to see what's going to happen with this type thing, in your opinion, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's up for council's consideration to direct administration to take any steps that you would like us to take. My understanding of this program, though, is that there was early on the observation that there may have been some holes in the federal program for some businesses to take part in that federal program. So Community Futures in the city of Medicine Hat sought to fill that void themselves, so to speak. And then federally, Community Futures was granted some dollars federally in order to have a national program that then filled that void that was there originally. So with that, we would be able to benefit from some of those funds locally, because the program has become a national program, not a specific Medicine Hat Community Futures program. However, we don't know what that actually looks like yet, but it is intended to fill the gap in between the initial program that was put out to help businesses.
Okay, so in all fairness to administration, I don't think we can really direct anything because we don't know what's coming at this stage, right?
Stay tuned.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, with that question, until we know exactly what the federal relationship with sharing some money with Community Futures is going to look like and how that could roll out to the town of Tabor, it sounds like that's coming, but again, yes, we don't know what the details there are.
Okay, any other comments, questions? I think it's just something that's, thank you for your efforts thus far, and I think it's something we have to wait on and see what else comes out. And again, we could always bring this up for anything further in a standing item suggestion going forward when we do find more information, et cetera, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. So with that, I don't believe there's any motion required, or just for information. That's all you're asking.
Yes, if council would like to receive the information,
Okay,
information through the form of a motion.
All
that
right,
would
so
be
we're
great.
to make the motion, Councilor Thames.
Mr. Mayor, that move that council accepts the information about the City of Medicine Hat's financial plan for business as information.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carry unanimously. Thank you. Item 5, bylaws. Item 5.1, proposed property tax rate bylaw 7-2020. Mr. Arfeld.
Yes, the next two are squarely Mr. Orwa's, and I think we've had the disinfection done, so. Yes.
It's too strong for me.
So we have two proposed property tax bylaws, one the property tax and the other one the supplementary tax. Mr. Orwa, if you'd like to start off with the 5.1, the proposed property tax rate bylaw, please.
Thank you very much, members of council. So before we go through the motions to pass the bylaw, I just would like to draw your attention to the uniqueness of this particular bylaw, something that you're not used to seeing. Now, this particular bylaw incorporates the land acquired from MD, and to collect that levy, we have to apply the MD rates. We are only lucky this time that the MD passed their mill rates ahead of us. So we've incorporated that part into our bylaw. Now, there is just one thing there that I also want to draw your attention to. Now, when this particular land was acquired from the MD, now there's some payments there that needs to be made. And we have a schedule of payments that have already been set. But the unfortunate thing is the payments have been set, but when the actual assessment comes through and we apply the mill rates, this time around in 2020, there's a deficit. So I just want to draw the council attention to that, because we are going to see more of this in the subsequent years as well, depending on whether we revisit the agreement itself or things change. So the scheduled payment for when that land was acquired in 2020 is coming to around 92,000. But when the actual assessment came through with the MD rates, the levy to be collected is about 84,000. So we are short about 8,000 there. So that is something I wanted to bring to council attention before we go through this bylaw.
And Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add a little bit to that. So what Mr. Orr was specifically speaking to is the arrangement that we made on the annexation deal with regards to the taxation split per year over a 10-year period, going from 90, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40. And as we provide the 90, 80, 70, then we increase our take of that taxes to 10 and 20 and 30, right, to equalize out to 100% of that taxes over the next 10 years. When we were going through these negotiations with the MD, like we were, the Municipal Government Board did not allow us to put in the philosophy into the annexation agreement. We were forced to put in the actual rates from 2019 into that annexation agreement and use the tax rates from 2019, the actuals, and then calculated out the 10% every year decreasing that we would pay and the 10% increasing that we would keep over that 10-year period. They forced us to use the actual amounts. Now, when we, knowing that the province was going to give a linear assessment, those that pay linear assessment a break, we identified at that point that we are going down, we're setting ourselves up for failure essentially, right? Not being able to get as much money out of the assess based as previously was done. The direction that we received from Municipal Affairs and the Municipal Government Board was then to renegotiate based off of the actuals with the MD of Tabor when we knew what those actuals were going to be year to year. So an item that was going to be put forward on the Intermunicipal Development Committee between the town and the MD, I believe June the 6th is that meeting, and that meeting is scheduled for June the 6th. We'll be revisiting this agreement to bring it into real terms, not the terms that were made in 2019 that we were forced to apply to the agreement, but the actual terms of what we see with regards to this assessed amount this year. So both administrations have discussed this reality, and we went into this agreement knowing that forcing us to use actual values from 2019 was likely going to, benefit one party or the other, not knowing how that tax rate went one year to the next, because assessment's variable from one year to the next. We knew we were not going to stick on those values. So it is a bit of an effort then that we are going to have to go through every year negotiating with the MD to keep the philosophy of the 10% decreasing contribution to the MD and our 10% increasing over that 10-year window every year based off of the actual. So that is what Mr. Orwa has highlighted as the uniqueness with regards to this property tax bylaw.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Orwa, anything else to add here?
Yes, I think now with that, if you look at that bylaw, now you'll be seeing the annexed farmland, the annex. So that's the uniqueness of that bylaw, because we need to capture that, because we need to levy based on our bylaw. Now, apart from that, the others, like education side or seniors, those ones we can't control. But the impact on this from what you saw last time is because we had already received the seniors amount to be collected based on the equalized assessment, which is based on the 4 municipalities combined. The number was correct, but when we got, of course, the rates from the MD, still we had some little to collect. Now, instead of collecting that money, we now use that additional income to lower further a little bit on the senior side and also on the education side. The DIP requisition remains the same. Again, there we don't have any control. So apart from those ones, the mill rate is now for your consideration, the bylaw.
All right, thank you. Any other questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Garner.
Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion at this time that council gives first reading to bylaw 7-2020, being the property tax rate bylaw for the town of Tabor at this meeting.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Councillor Beckman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for Mr. Orva, if I may. What do you mean by senior tax rate? I don't quite understand the word senior tax rate.
So the seniors, so what happens is the equalized assessment, when it comes to seniors, the equalized assessment comes from the province. Now, based on that, they come up with a number. And then based on that number, we are given that one ahead of time. So like the seniors, we had about 108,000. That had already been processed. And we did reflect that one on the last mill rates that we showed you. Now, when we got the rates from the annexed land as well, we also had to collect some money from that area as well. Now, it was not much, but it was about 1,000 and something. So instead of collecting, I don't have a way of showing the province why I'm collecting extra amount. So what we do is we take that money coming in to lower a little bit of the rates or the mill rates for the seniors. So you'll be seeing a small negligible percentage of rate coming down for the seniors. And the same thing applies also to education side, because the province has already sent in to us, we want you to pay 2.7 million, which had already factored in the previous mill rates that council saw. But now when we got the annexed land as well with the rates, still had to collect some money. But I don't have a way of showing what I'm going to do with the extra. So I use that extra to lower again the education rates as well. So you'll be seeing again, the citizens are going to see some relief on the education rate going down, and the seniors as well are going to see some rates going down.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr.
All
Mayor.
right, thank you. All right, Councillor Chavez.
Worship, for clarification, Mr. Orwa, you mean the seniors requisition,
That's correct.
not the mill rate?
That's correct. The
Great,
senior
yes.
requisition and the education requisition.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's why Councillor Beckering was a little confused.
Okay, all right. Once again, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And the second required motion. Someone prepared to make that motion. Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move the council gives second reading to bylaw 7-2020, being the property tax rate bylaw of the town of Tabor at this meeting.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Someone prepared to make the third motion. Councillor Towns.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move that council unanimously agrees to proceed with the third and final reading to bylaw 7-2020, being the property tax rate bylaw of the town of Tabor at this meeting.
Sorry, Councillor Towns, I think you read number 4. Did you not?
Agreed.
Did I?
Unanimously consent.
See that? Okay, sorry. All right. Unanimously accept. Okay. All right, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Good, thank you. And the fourth motion required. Councillor Stravas.
Yes, that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 7-2020, being the property tax rate bylaw for the town of Tabor at this meeting.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, on to item 5.2, proposed supplementary tax rate bylaw 8-2020. Mr. Aurora.
Thank you,
Very much again, members of council. So the second bylaw is just based on the supplementary assessment. So this one now authorizes the town to impose supplementary tax based on the tax rate bylaw that has just passed a few minutes ago. So any new constructions, major renovations, any improvement out there still will have to subject them to the current mill rates.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion, Councillor Beckering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Prepared to move that council gives first reading to bylaw 8-2020, being the supplementary tax rate bylaw for the town of Tabor as presented.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. And the second required motion. Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that council give second reading to bylaw 8-2020, being the supplementary tax rate bylaw of the town of Tabor as presented.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. And the third required motion, Councillor Bruin.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make the motion that council unanimously agrees to proceed with third and final readings to bylaw 8-2020, being the supplementary tax rate bylaw of the town of Tabor as presented.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And the fourth motion required, Councillor Thames.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw 8-2020, being the supplementary tax rate bylaw for the town of Tabor as presented.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Great. Thank you. And a 5.3 proposed municipal campground bylaw 10-2020. Mr. Arfeld.
Yes. And I'm drawing a blank. I don't know why. Don Phillips, not Phyllis Monks. Miss Phillips is here to present the campground bylaw, please.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of council. With the addition of our Trout Pond campground, we now operate 2 municipal campgrounds, and we feel that it's important to provide some clear rules and regulations. So we're proposing the attached bylaw, which will also give our Tabor Police Service the authority to enforce and issue violation tickets as necessary.
All right. Thank you. Any questions arising? Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Ms. Phillips. Perhaps I missed it, but the only thing I couldn't find was the nightly rate that we were prepared.
You refer to the fee bylaw. Okay. So in the fee bylaw, it's $26 a night for the campsites at Ken McDonald, and it's $31 a night. $31 a night for the Trout Pond for the 30 amp service.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Someone prepared to make a motion, Councillor Garner.
I had a question.
Yes.
I guess I have a slight concern. 13.1, all persons shall immediately register at the pool. How's that going to work for us?
We're going to be creative at this point in time.
Okay.
Due to the pool being closed. We have our phone forwarded to various staff to take phone calls. So they'll call the Aqua Fund Center and we'll take their information and then we'll issue invoices. There was some discussion around that as to whether we should do it that way. The idea is eventually our Intelli program, we should be able to just entirely register online, so they should be able to take their phone and register.
Right.
We're not there yet with Intelli, but that's where we're going. So we wanted to, rather than self-regulation, and our police service did wonder if we were going that route. So I think they're happy we're not. So we would work with the users at this point and make it work. So, yes.
My observation is I think a lot of the people, residents and people, locals, know where the actual fun center is and what that is. But if you're coming from, let's say, BC or something, out of town, you'd say, where is this place? So, I mean, the address is there, I guess. But
we're creating some signage out there as well that will have that on there to register, go to, and it'll have the address as well as, or call to register online.
Oh, that's good.
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
All right, anything else? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move that council gives first reading to Municipal Campground Bylaw 10-2020 at this meeting.
Great, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And the next required motion, Councillor Thames.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move that council gives second reading to Municipal Campground Bylaw 10-2020 at this meeting.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. And the third required motion. Councillor Bruin.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Mayor, that council unanimously agrees to proceed with third and final reading to Municipal Campground Bylaw 10-2020 at this meeting.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. And the fourth required motion. Councillor Stravas.
Yes, Your Worship, that the council gives the third and final reading to the Municipal Campground Bylaw 10-2020 at this meeting.
Okay, motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you,
Phillips.
Ms. Phillips. All right, on to action items. Item 6.1, Municipal Strategic Direction and Response. Mr. Armfield.
Yeah, I think I can probably handle this myself. I'll just get to the request for decision point. Earlier when the COVID scenario hit in mid-March, Council made the call to suspend the board's committee and commission meetings at that point. We are getting some interest to hold a number of those meetings, specifically the police commission meeting, and we'd like to get our arts and cultural committee up and going. And I believe that there is some desire to have a rec board meeting because there are some things that are backing up for the rec board as well. So just bringing this back to council to see if you would like to reevaluate your position that you made back in the middle of March and to start to do a little more business as usual.
All right, thank you. Any questions, comments, Councillor Garner?
No, I think it's high time, and I'm prepared to make a motion at this time.
All right, Councillor Garner, you bet.
Okay, the council removes the March 16th, 2020 suspension of board, committee, and commission meetings for the Recreation Board, Arts and Heritage Committee, Development Authority, Municipal Planning Commission, and the Tabor Municipal Police Commission. And the council directs the board, committees, and commissions to engage in their regular meetings as they wish.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.2, Seniors Week 2020, Mr. Armfield.
Yeah, we received a note from the lovely Minister Pon with regards to a request that the council designate Seniors Week from June the 1st to June the 7th, 2020. Just bringing that forward for council's consideration.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Thames.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, move that council, in honor of the past, present, and future contributions of the seniors of this community and throughout Alberta, hereby declares June 1st to the 7th, 2020 to be Seniors Week in the town of Tabor.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6.3, Quality Management Plan. Mr. Armfield.
Yes, Ms. Monks, I'd like to call Ms. Monks up to address the Quality Management Plan. Yes, I'm quite sure. You'll get some to throw at me at the next meeting.
Your Worship and members of Council, the Town of Tabor is an accredited municipality under the Safety Codes Act. So each year, Safety Codes Council requires the town to complete an annual internal review. In 2018, the review was completed, and the Safety Codes Council has identified that the town is not using the most recent version of the Quality Management Plan that is provided as a template for municipalities to ensure consistency within the program. So for the 2019 review, the town has been selected for an audit, which will be performed in September. It's not related to the Quality Management Plan. Administration has updated the template for the Quality Management Plan and ensured that the information is up to date. As a requirement under the old template, council approval is required to amend the plan. So administration is seeking approval in order for the CAO and mayor to execute the document and have it in place prior to our audit. So with regard to the documentation in the package, the version will be cleaned up to remove those portions where it indicates delete if not applicable. There were a couple of items that we needed to just clarify, and those have since been finalized in the final document that the mayor and CAO will execute. So if council could modify your recommendation to accept the Quality Management Plan as amended, if you were of a mind to approve it, that I would appreciate that. Easy for me to say.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move the council accepts the Quality Management Plan as amended and authorizes the mayor and CAO to sign it.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6.4, mutual aid agreement with MD of Tabor. Mr. Armfeld.
Yeah, I'd like to call Chief Munshaw up just to speak to this. If council has any questions on it, but of course, this is our agreement that defines our relationship for service with the MD. Chief Munshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Armfeld, Mayor and Council. So in front of you is a renewal agreement for the mutual aid agreement with the MD of Tabor. This agreement's been in place since 2017, expiring this year. This one's just in renewal for the next 3 years. It follows the same process as the Southern Alberta Resource Sharing Agreement, as it's a fee for service on both parties' side. So it's the MD of Tabor has agreed to this type of agreement and wants to move forward for another 3-year contract. I'm open for any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Councillor Chavez?
Yes, Your Worship, to Mr. Munshaw, Chief Munshaw. Just out of curiosity, how many times was this agreement utilized for and with the MD back and forth? Do you have any specific numbers as how many times?
We have called out the MD of Tabor twice on different mutual aid type calls. We have not had any other correspondence to go over and supply service on their side.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions arising? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Bruin.
Mr. Mayor, question. So that's basically the same as the SARSA agreement, just to not yet willing to sign the provincial one. Correct. Okay. With that, Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion.
All right.
The council authorizes the mayor and chief administrator officer to sign the 3-year mutual aid fire agreement with the Municipal District of Tabor.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to item 6.5, information for council. Mr. Armfeld.
Yeah, a couple of bits of information there for council at this meeting, and just again, outstanding skills of our communications coordinator and what she can do to make things look great has been recognized by the Hermes Awards again. Again, I'm just kind of cycling down to that spot here. Oh, there we go. There's one, there's the other. Yeah, so an actual gold award for the committee volunteers campaign posters, and then an honorable mention for the CI welcome reception speech. So just 2 points of information for council.
Great, thank you. Any questions arising, comments? And I think just to clarify, I believe Ms. Brennan was the one responsible for these.
Certainly, Ms. Brennan is behind a lot of the graphics, and
right,
the gold award, no doubt, would be in Ms. Brennan's wheelhouse.
All right, I'm
yes.
not sure were any other staff or administration part of this, or mainly Ms. Brennan.
Well, Ms. Brennan has there's a number of staff that support her in what she does, but she's probably not recognized enough because she likes to give other people recognition. But I would say that this one falls clearly on her desk. I'd
just like to make a comment and commend Ms. Brennan for her great work, very well done, and any other staff that may be attached to any assistance that Ms. Brennan is normally so humble about. If that's the case, then I would certainly convey that message as well. So thank you so much, Ms. Brennan and staff that are involved. Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would echo your statements, and I will move that council accepts the material received in this agenda item as information.
Thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, on to item 6.6, department reports. Mr. Armfeld.
Yes, the department reports are there for your consideration. Let us know if you have any questions, please.
All right, thank you. I'll just go through these individually. If you have any questions, just advise me accordingly, please. Fire department report. Recreation report. Water and wastewater report. Engineering and public works. Human resource report. Plan and economic development report. Finance activity report. Administrative service report. And CAO activity report. All right, seeing no questions, ask for a motion to accept those as presented. Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I move that council accepts the department reports for information.
Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. On to item 6.7, Mayor and Councillor reports. Councillor Firth.
Mr. Mayor, I have had a very quiet month. I've attended all the very few required meetings that are still going, and also some of the EOC meetings as well.
Great, thank you. Councillor Beckering.
Mr. Mayor, nothing to report, except I attended the Tabor Exhibition Association meeting last Wednesday. First one in about 3 months.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thames.
Mr. Mayor, same thing. Very quiet month. Have nothing to report.
Thank you. Councillor Garner.
Report that I attended the MPC meeting, also the Trout Pond on-site meeting, which was very good. And I tried to tune into the EOC meetings on a fairly regular basis.
Good, thank you. Councillor Strauss.
Nothing really to report this time.
Thank you. Councillor Bruin.
It's been fairly quiet. I've attended a couple teleconferences with the Highway 3 executive. Things are moving along there very nicely. That's about it.
All right, thank you. And for myself, I've been on a variety of teleconference calls there with ministry, AHS, etc. All very informative and a lot of good work going on across the province. And I think the town of Tabor is doing very well in that regard also. Also been part of the EOC meetings regularly. And that's great work on behalf of the town of Tabor for anyone involved with that for the organizational aspect. One highlight, I guess, I was involved and very thrilled to be part of the Mr. and Mrs. Leahy 70th wedding anniversary. Attended with our fire department and part of the parade with some 40 some odd vehicles, I believe, were part of that, and was very honored to present Mr. and Mrs. Leahy with some congratulatory words and or a certificate and scroll at hockey stick length that they felt was very well received as well, and very happy about the whole scheme of things. That definitely wasn't their plan as far as what they envisioned about their party, but all things considered, it went over pretty well. So congratulations to the Leahys as well, and that would be my report. So with that, just need a motion to accept those reports as presented. Councillor Thames.
Mr. Mayor, move that council accepts the mayor and council reports for information.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And on to 6.8, standard item council requests. Mr. Armfield.
This is the opportunity that council has to ask administration any questions or give us direction through the form of a motion.
All right, thank you. Any standard item asks? Councillor Strauss.
Yes, Your Worship. I have a number of them, actually. Several of them deal with the rain that we had last week. Was contacted by the residents across from Tabor Christian School there, and they still have drainage problems in their alley. Back in 2017, we said that Town Council voted unanimously to support the Tabor Christian neighbors' request to update the storm drainage at the easterly alley between Tabor Christian School. I'm not quite sure where we sit with this. Perhaps we can find out if there's any further advance in mitigating that water situation there for them.
Mr. Armfield.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer this question directly with regards to the Tabor Christian School. That the upgrades there were done as part of the expansion to the Tabor Christian School. There was a number of conditions put onto that development permit expansion, which the consultant or the contractor complied with and considered as part of that development for the Tabor Christian School expansion. So all of the mitigative works that were required with regards to that Tabor Christian School expansion as per the development permit conditions, I was fairly involved in that situation there, and I know that they were all met. All the conditions of the development permit were met with regards to what they had to do to mitigate that water for their expansion.
All right, that's great news.
That's not saying that there couldn't be additional issues there, but related to the Tabor Christian School, those development permit conditions were met.
Okay, great. Councillor Chavez?
Just in follow-up, of course, I was called over there, and there's a fair amount of pooling running down the alley there and whatnot. So they still have some concerns there. And as I went around and seen that their water collection area was empty on their site, but yet there was an abundance of water flowing from the schoolyard into the alley to create some problems. But I don't know if we could have maybe our public works could keep an eye on it for us and help them mitigate some of that, because it does pond there quite a bit.
All right. I don't know. Are we looking for some actual direction there, or just an ask from? I mean, all things considered, we did receive 4.5 inches of rain, which is highly unusual all at once.
That's true. We did, and you know, and it seems to me, since I've been on council for the last 7 years, it seems like these occurrences seem to be more and more regular all the time.
You know, and I think I was in contact with Mr. Armfield also, and he was updating us accordingly throughout the day related to what was involved there. And our system all through the community was handling it. And our crews, and thanks to Mr. Armfield and or Mr. Shear with all the crews out and monitor that, and accordingly, that was well done and obviously very effective and efficient. And I personally didn't receive any complaints about that, and took a couple of tours there and saw, the ditches were full, but it was flowing, and everything seemed to be running
well, Your Worship,
properly.
I was also called out there, and on 64th Avenue, the water was pooling on Tabor Bowling Alley's property there, and backing up onto Venture Holdings property on the corner of, I think it's 53rd and 64th. And then if you went further east from there, the water was running freely from 56th Avenue to the collection ponds that way there. But it seems like whether the culvert is undersized or something there at 56th Avenue, it was kind of backing up, you know, all the way to 53rd for the 3 blocks there. And again, maybe that's something that the owners of the properties there that called me said that they have seen the town was out doing maintenance on those culverts, you know, regularly, so they didn't feel that it was being restricted or anything. But perhaps we just need to take a look at, maybe we need to resize those culverts so they don't, because I think these rain events are probably going to happen more often.
All right. Any other comments? I guess the only other one I was aware of was some pooling in 56th Avenue, 56th Street for a time. It didn't come up over the sidewalk or anything, but the road was definitely pooling. But it settled down soon after. So again, it appeared that all our systems were functioning properly, and were certainly monitored accordingly. Saw the town crews out on a lot of locations there. And
I agree, Your Worship, but these issues were brought to us previously a number of years ago. Myself and Councillor Bruin had driven around and looked at these, and we made note that on the other side of 64th, where Horizon is, there's nice large culverts there, and the water was flowing through quite easily. There was no pooling on the south side of 64th, but it was on the north side of 64th. So I don't know, maybe administration could take a look at that, Public Works, and maybe come back, you know, just with some information for us anyway. Not in the form of a motion. I think it's just
okay. I guess that's what makes it difficult for our administration generally, and that it's kind of open-ended. I'm not sure.
Would you prefer a motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if you would like us to provide you with some information, we would like to know what target we are to hit.
Yeah, it's a little unclear to me, so I'm sure administration's feeling the same way.
Perhaps then I'll have to fashion a motion here if I can get back to it here. Perhaps the motion I will read will to check on the circumferences of the on the north side of 64th from 53rd Street to 56th Street. to whether they could handle the amount of water that would come down in over a 2-day period, whether we had 4 inches of rain. I can fashion that once I'm done these other ones.
So you want to go through what else you have for Senate?
Well,
before
yeah,
you go and
because
get into that motion?
I have a couple others that.
I think we should probably deal with this first.
Okay.
Just
all right.
before we
Well,
get
then
into
just
anything else
take
in.
a minute.
What's our official amount of rain, 4.5, or
That's what I understand. Yeah, from a couple different sources right in town that I'm aware of. So
I heard 5, or I saw 5 in one gauge, so it was a little sporadic where it was
Yeah.
hitting, but it was quite a downpour there.
short time frame overall.
A lot of it at night that no one saw.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if this covers it or not, Your Worship, but that council directs administration to look at the culverts on the north side of 64th Avenue from 53rd to 56th Streets to handle water properly in a 2-inch rain day.
Okay, Mr. Arfel, I'm not sure that that's necessarily clear to me.
It certainly gives us some geographic specifics that we can work to.
Locations, okay, but I don't know how you, Mr. Shear, can you measure that?
Mr. Shear, if you are coming up and speaking. Well,
So there's a number of factors in play here, right? Is the amount of rain over a specific set of time, the elevations from one culvert to the storm pond. We can look into all of that and provide information back to council with the modeling saying this size culvert will suit you better. Is that our intent?
That's what I'm understanding, I believe, from Councilor Stravos, but I guess is that, does that say that enough in the motion? Is that clear enough in the motion to say that
Clear
looking
for
at?
you?
It's certainly clear enough for me.
I just wanted to point out your system is engineered for a 1 and 2 event right now. It was because it's so much rain in such a short period of time. It actually was about a 1.1 and 7.5 year event. So yes, there is going to be surcharging within the ditches, no doubt about that. But currently, your ponds and culverts are at a 1 to 2.
1 to 2 inch rain?
No,
what do you mean by
2 year event? 1 to 2 year event.
Oh, okay.
I think, Mr. Shear, it would be better if we heard council's directions, and then you and I had a conversation about how to meet that target with details.
Yeah, we can bring it back.
Okay, fair enough. So again, just to confirm, that's
if there's a specific question, I'll handle it and ask for your support.
Yes.
Otherwise, we'll hear the direction and we'll provide them with your information.
All right, Councilor Stravos, go again with that motion then.
So then that council directs administration to look at the culverts on the north side of 64th Avenue from 53rd Street to 56th Street to handle water properly in a 2-inch rain day.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried, that was good. Thank you. And you had another standing item?
Yes. Have a couple. The annexed lands that we have over there, we haven't really done or said to do much with them. We have the property immediately south of TDLH water hauling there. There's a couple of screw pumps there. Perhaps council could see fit to maybe advertise it and have it broken up and put a pivot on there for potatoes, sugar beets. I know just a quarter mile south of there, there's a farmer there, and he does that right there. So I'm sure that ground there would be suitable. It would be a shame to leave it sit there without any income, because we're probably not going to utilize those lands in the next little while. So if we turn it into farmland, at least maybe we could get 20% of a potato or a beet crop in relation to getting some income back from that property.
Sorry, just to clarify, Councillor Strauss, which land are you talking
This
about?
is our newly annexed land, which would be west of the trout pond, which would be immediately south of the TWH business right there on the way to the dump road, just right south of that and west of 864. I think there's probably enough room there to put a medium-sized pivot there.
Sorry, you said west of the trout pond.
Sorry, east of the trout pond,
East.
west of 864, south of TWH, the landfill road.
Rodeo grounds?
Yeah, where the old rodeo grounds is. It would actually be a little east of the rodeo grounds. There's some property in there. Presently, right now, south that far corner there, town works. They piled their snow on there as a drainage site to remove snow from. But I would think that top corner there could be utilized as income for farmland.
So I'm just trying to think. That's not a quarter session, Mr. Arthur, is it? A whole quarter session there, or is it?
I'm not familiar exactly with it. We own it all, right?
Yeah,
So,
right.
if you would like, I could provide council with some details as to.
I just know, just not to rain on your parade, Councillor Strauss, but I know that site is very well utilized by the town, correct, Mr. Scheer, for snow removal and accumulation purposes because of the lay of the land there and how it drains accordingly. So I don't know how much of that we're using, but again, I guess that can come out in
Your worship, that what the town is the town is utilizing the piece a little bit south of that to pile their snow on there. I think that upper corner there a pivot could be put there.
Mr. Arthur just indicated he could put something together for us in that regard, but are you in need of a motion for that, Mr. Arfeld, or
I would just like to provide council with some information.
Sure. Okay. You good with that, Councillor Chavez?
Yes.
Councillor Brown?
Just a comment on that. I think the best thing for that land is leave it into grass until it's developed, because with our famous west winds, we're going to have a sandstorm in Tabor. If you remember, not too many years ago, where the land blew north of the town, took down fences and all that. I don't think we want to disturb that grass until we start developing it. And to invest the money on a pivot on that and have a project come forward to us saying we want to build a complex or something there, and we'll say, well, we just spent $200,000 putting a pivot here. We're not going to entice. We don't want you there. I'm against developing that land for agriculture just because of the factor of wind erosion and whatnot.
Councillor Beckering?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The suggestion was made by administration that they will look into the matter and bring a report of some sort or a response to the question Councillor Strover said back to us. So let's leave it alone for now then, please.
Good with that? All right.
Mr. Mayor, I could provide you with some information.
Sure.
If you would like. So what we have coming to council and over the next coming weeks, and I could put Ms. Monks on the spot, but I won't, is an amendment to the municipal development plan. So we have been working on some mapping with regards to amending the municipal development plan, because that land that we have recently annexed is actually not considered in our municipal development plan. And had this COVID situation not hit, we certainly would be there already, but we kind of got obligated with this other fiasco. Anyway, so we will be bringing forward an amendment to the municipal development plan, which will consider that exactly. What are the sorts of uses that council would like to see on that property? And then a full and comprehensive discussion and participation with the public can be made on what that is. Where this has come from is I've also heard over the last couple of weeks, which I'm sure Councillor Stravis has, from the same individual, heard the potential of developing a pivot on that property, which has manifested because of the approach that we've taken to the maintenance of the lands for the weeds and the relationship that we've made with a individual to go in and maintain that property. He said that a higher value for that property could be sought if we put a pivot on it. But that's of course up to council, and we will facilitate those conversations through the Municipal Development Plan amendment.
Fair enough. Yep. All right, thank you. Councillor Strauss, you had something else also?
I have one last item. Sorry, I've been so busy. It was brought to my attention that our community standards officers here in town are passing out tickets for individuals that have for sale signs in the windows of their vehicles, and they're issuing $80 tickets for them. I'm a little concerned with this because you know, I think that we should have some leeway here, and of course they're mandated by the Highway Traffic Act as far as what can be done. And I think that if we take a look at this, I mean, we could certainly allow a resident that parks his vehicle in front of his house to have a for sale sign in the back window. The problem, of course, is that if it's parked on the street, it's ticketable, but if it's parked in his driveway, it's not. And I'll just kind of give you some background here. Advertising on highways, Section 109, a person shall not do any of the following on a highway: display any goods for sale, park a vehicle that is being displayed for sale, or that is displaying advertising directing persons to a commercial premise, notwithstanding subsection 1, a road authority may, by bylaw or order authorized subject to any terms or conditions that road authority prescribes, the display of goods or the sale of goods on a highway under its direction and control and management. Therefore, this council could therefore allow a resident of a property to have a for sale sign in the back window of their vehicle, as long as it doesn't obstruct their view from the roadway. This is up for discussion and some input from the rest of council.
Well, Councillor Strauss, I hate to rain on your parade again here, but I'm going to have to. I think this is actually more of a suitable conversation that should be had at the police commission level. And related to what you're suggesting, related to the bylaw doesn't supersede the Traffic Safety Act, Criminal Code, etc. Correct? So yes, we can change some bylaws, but again, this is as you said, indicated, these community standards officers are following the provincial guidelines, and I think this really falls under more police commission discussion.
Well,
as far as possibilities that way.
Your Worship, it's a bylaw issue, and I mean the police commission can recommend the change on a bylaw, but it's council that would have to make this change. And just for clarification here, under the Highway Traffic Act, Section 14, Item 2, where permitted under a regulation, a municipality may, subject to any term or condition prescribed by the regulation, make bylaws under which the municipality may provide that regulation does not apply in whole or in part to or within the municipality. So this bylaw can override the Highway Traffic Act. And this is right out of the Act, Your Worship.
Yeah, it's. Are you reading the Highway Traffic Act there, or Traffic Safety Act?
Traffic Safety Act and use of highway and rules on the road regulations.
Okay.
Both of them.
As I said, I honestly don't know that. I think it's a little premature to be discussing here. I think it's got to be before the police commission. Mr. Armfield, any input related to that?
Mr. Mayor, I would concur with you in this situation. This would be something that should be brought up with the police commission, and then if the police commission sought to make a motion recommending a bylaw change to council, that's the usual format for these things to go through. Considered at the board, committee, commission level first.
Yeah, that's
motion
how I
is
interpret
made,
that
and then amendment is made at council if necessary. So yes, sir, I agree with you.
Thank you. I'll take that under advisement.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything else, Councillor Chavez? Standing items?
I think I've said enough.
Well, all right. Anybody else? Been quiet. Okay, with that, so we do have the one motion, I believe, what was on there, and that's dealt with. So there's nothing else, correct? Everything else was just ongoing and under.
Oh, yes.
informational process?
To provide an update as to the list, yes, now with us being able to hold a police commission meeting again, I would imagine that the motion by Councillor Firth that has probably been languishing the longest, we can deal with that one at the next police commission meeting.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. All right. With that, we're back onto the new 6.9 related to recognition requests. Mr. Armfeldt.
Yeah, so for purposes of just transparency, because this was in closed session, we've moved it into open. I feel for the record, I should just run through this request for decision for public's consideration that might be viewing at home.
Sure.
So this has to do with signage at the trout pond. And the background states, William Ferguson bequeathed $2.4 million to the town of Tabor in 2016. A portion of these funds were committed to the development of the Tabor Trout Pond. The Tabor Trout Pond Committee has requested that a rock be installed at the Tabor Trout Pond entrance with the intention of attaching a plaque in recognition of the contribution of Mr. Ferguson that had been used to develop the trout pond. At a meeting on April the 30th, 2020, the Trout Pond Committee requested that administration bring this request to council for approval. The Trout Pond Committee member suggested the following words for the plaque. This park made possible with a generous contribution from William Ferguson. This request was not brought to the Recreation Board as the Recreation Board meetings have been postponed due to COVID-19. Legislative authority, the MGA, strategic plan amendment, enhanced sense of community, financial implication, approximately $525. No significant impact to services on staff side. Justification, the contributions made by Mr. Ferguson have made the development of the Tabor Trout Pond possible, and the recommendation from your administration is that council direct administration to attach a plaque to the rock installed inside the Tabor Trout Pond entrance stating that this park made possible with a generous contribution from William Ferguson.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising, comments? There was a suggested wording, which is fine. I'm just wondering if it's also applicable to include the amount in there, which I believe was a significant $900,000 total for that particular project. Mr. Armfeldt.
That would be up to council's consideration. Certainly, there's been additional money invested in that facility beyond the $900,000. But the $900,000 that he contributed was the seed money, I suppose, that got that project going. That would be up to council.
The vast majority. So again, that's just I don't know. You see that elsewhere. A lot of cases there with the figures. I don't know if that's important or the wording's good overall, I think. But just an ask. If any other comments, Councillor Tams?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I disagree with it. I like the wording that the park made possible with a generous contribution. It's not just the dollar value. It was the thought and everything else. And I think
if we publicly announced it before, for sure. So
I think that the wording is fantastic.
Okay, Councillor Garner.
This time I'm prepared to make a motion.
All right.
That the council directs administration to attach a plaque to the rock installed inside the trout pond entrance stating this park made possible with the generous contribution from William Ferguson.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Good, thank you. And we're now on to our delegation. I guess we're a little over. I assume Ms. Westerhout is here?
Yes, I believe she is here.
Okay. And everybody good to hear this out before we take a break? Probably 10 minutes roughly. Okay, all right. Ms. Westerhout.
Mr. Mayor.
How are you doing today?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. On anytime, you bet. Yes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. So I'm here. My name's Kathy Westerhout, former employee at the town of Tabor, different panel. But, we're all here for the same reason, I think, to do better for our community. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is a Slow Your Roll campaign that started out in Lethbridge. There was a young man killed in Lethbridge. He was 10 years old. The driver was doing the speed limit. Looked both ways. driver was not charged with anything, but did hit the 10-year-old, and the 10-year-old expired. And so forward from that, you know, sometimes when we put signs up saying it's a playground or it's a school zone, it just becomes commonplace and people don't recognize that there's a sign out there anymore. And I'm guilty of that myself. Subsequent to that, 2 weeks later, Chris DePascal came up with a program, and it's called Slow Your Roll. So it's already a recognizable sign in southern Alberta, and you'll see them up in Lethbridge. Coaldale has them. Colehurst has them. We've had inquiries now from subdivisions in Calgary, Edmonton, and as far away as Vancouver, and I like to see it come to Tabor. And it's not to institute a new playground, it's not or a zone or anything like that. The idea behind it is just to bring more awareness to the public that there are kids playing, and I notice it now more than ever because I'm at home now and we're primary caregivers for our 3 grandkids since the COVID because they can't be in daycare. There's kids playing in the street all the time, and how it's working in the other communities is when the kids go outside, they take the sign with them, they just stamp it into the ground in the front lawn. When they're finished playing, they take it back in with them. So it's not something that sits out there all of the time. It's meant to bring your attention. There's kids out there playing right now. Slow your roll and pay attention to where you're going and what's out there. Kids are unpredictable. And so I'm not asking for any money. I'm not asking for anything else. I had made some inquiries, and I know that this is the avenue that I have to go to get your approval and your support to make this happen. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you. Any questions arising? Councillor Bruin.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's a fantastic idea. We've all been home a lot lately, seeing the kids playing on the streets, and something like that grabs your attention and maybe make some people slow down. So I support this, and I think it's a great thing.
All right, Councillor Garner.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I personally have 2 friends whose sons were involved in traffic accidents within the town. One was survived and one didn't survive. And I also have 18 grandchildren, none of them in Tabor, but yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's long overdue.
Oh.
Your worship, to our delegation here, I like what you've got there and whatnot. Did you ever, was there any consideration of use, and I know in other communities have those children at play signs, which is it's a plastic child. It's quite stands about 4 feet high, and it's a little thicker and whatnot. I don't know if it's more durable or not. Whether that was looked at, or whether you just prefer this one here.
Your worship, back to Councillor Strauss, right? Yes. So, and I think those are more common where they have day homes and things like that. That's why those ones, and that's why they're like the individual, it looks like a person with their arm out like this, so that when you have a day home, that people are aware of those. This is specifically, and they're more meant to be permanent, where these are, you know what? The kids are playing outside right now, stick out the sign, and when they're done playing, they take the sign back in them. So that it grabs the the driver's attention that there's kids playing here now. Not 10 minutes from now, not 3 hours from now, not tomorrow, right now. There's kids here somewhere. Thank you for your question, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Kathy. Well, how can you be opposed to that, right? Doesn't cost any money.
Pardon me?
So it doesn't cost any money, so let's do an administration's recommendation, I think is right on point. That we thank you for your presentation, and that administration has to determine whether there's any change to make to our land use bylaw or not, and then report back to council, but I'm totally 100% behind you.
Councillor Beck, so your worship, back through to Councillor Beck. So one of the things I think that, of course, there's a cost to these signs. I'm not funding it, right? So the signs are $50. So a homeowner can purchase them themselves, parents, grandparents, whoever you can buy them yourselves. The little green heart here is just for Charles McIntyre. That was the individual that was passed away in Lethbridge. And you can have that on there if you want. You don't have to have it on there if you want. But for those individuals that can't afford them, they can approach their own employer, or they can approach the other people on their block, or whatever they want. The reason that it has to come this way is I own a company in Tabor. So if Safety Matters wanted to sponsor 5 of these signs for $250, then down here in a 4-inch square would be my logo, and then that's it. And I think that's the concern, that was like, how big is that logo going to be? What does it have? Like that kind of stuff. And that's all it's for. It's not meant to advertise my business. It's saying that my business supports this program. And I recognize that your block needs one of these. Please take this one when your kids are playing out there.
Mr. Towns.
I'm glad that you answered that, because I've driven past a dozen of them, because on the way, my way to work, I see them all over the place, and the ones, some have the green hearts, some have the sign sponsored by. So I'm glad you did that. But I am totally with Councillor Beckery and our administration, what they're recommending, to thank you for it, because like you said, how can you vote against it? And I think we just need to look at our bylaw, and I think it's a great program. Thanks, Kathy.
What's your first? Do you have anything to add?
I didn't, but I agree totally with what other councillors have said, and thank you for your presentation, and I would be happy to have one of those in my yard. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kathy, for your presentation, and thank you so much for getting a hold of me originally with the ask, and I made some further inquiries to our police chief and our CAO, Mr. Armfeld, to get to this stage. So thank you again to administration for putting this together so timely. And it is very important. And again, how can you not support something like this that's going to be safety orientated? And I think it'll be a great thing. It'll go over well, and it'll mushroom from there. So thank you so much for your presentation and your commitment to making this happen in the town of Tabor. And it's for all of Taborites and area benefit as a result there. So again, I think there is some potential bylaw related scenarios we got to work through to make this happen, but I don't think it's not rocket science. I'm sure we can make this happen effectively sooner or later.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. So with that, any other questions, or someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Garner?
Just a comment. I would hesitate to go with advertisers on those, even if they're well-meaning, because I don't think you want to have people advertising. I think you want to keep it as simple and as concise as possible. Because knowing realtors, this brought to you by Remax or Century 21, I think you want to just keep it as simple as possible. And I would deter putting additional stuff on there. That's my opinion.
Councillor Bruin.
My thoughts on that is I think it's a great idea. People will sponsor them, and we'll have them around neighborhoods. So I don't mind having a little decal on the bottom. If someone's willing to buy a sign to slow vehicles down, I think it's great.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just willing to make the motion. Do we require 2 motions, or can I make them in one?
Please go ahead and make 2 motions if you think you're going to get support for 2 motions. We break them up just in case we're mixing pleasures, and some people might like one thing and not the other, but if you have confidence,
that can happen.
Be my guest.
I feel pretty good about this one. I move that council accepts the Slow Your Roll campaign material for information purposes and thanks the delegation for their presentation, and that council directs administration to determine if any changes are needed to the land use bylaw related to the requested signage in the community for the Slow Your Roll campaign, and bring back the suggested changes for council's further consideration.
All right, thank you. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you again, Kathy.
Thank you very much.
That was the most polite delegation we've had.
She knows how to do it.
It's very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we need 10 minutes. Oh, sorry, that's right. They're not here, so that throws me. Any indication from our media representation?
No questions, sir. No questions.
Okay, great. Thank you. With that, I'll just ask for a motion for 10 minutes before we recess 10 minutes before we move into closed session, but to move into closed session on our return.
Mr. Mayor, move that we recess for 10 minutes and when we reconvene in the closed session.
Thank you. Motion on the table. All in favor? Carried now. It's good. Thank you.
I'll go home. Put her down now.